Okay, the debate structure I put in the stage text, so it's going to be 10 minutes opening each, then 30 minutes open discussion, and then 10 minutes Q&A. So if people want to join the stage, they can do after and ask questions. And yeah, if you guys are ready, we can start.
Yeah, do you want to go first, man? I don't have anything specific to say at the beginning. I mean, it's gonna be like usual. Just okay, go ahead.
I would prefer to go first. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. 10 minutes for you. Go ahead.
Give me a moment. Let me start the recording.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm starting now. So, Bismillah, in today's debate, we are debating whether God exists or not. This debate is not about whether Islam or a particular religion is from God or not. Now, before I go to the arguments, let me just make one point about the burden of proof. Whether God exists is a claim. God does not exist is also a claim. Both are claims, both require proof, and believing either claim without any proof is blind faith. Now, basically, I'll be making three arguments for the existence of God: Kalam, fine-tuning, and basically information required for biological life. Let's start with the Kalam. So here's the argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now, this is a deductive argument, so if the both premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows. So as for the premise one, the reason it's true is that its opposite, namely something coming into existence from absolutely nothing, is irrational and insane. And this is not just based on experience, because just think about this point. If there is absolutely nothing, truly nothing, why would anything emerge from it? Why would anything change there? It would be just nothing, which is why it's irrational to claim that something can come into existence from nothing. Hence, premise one is true. The second point, second premise is the universe began to exist. Now, basically, give two arguments for this: one from philosophy, one from science. The one from philosophy is simple: that an infinite regress of events ending is impossible. Now, if the universe is past eternal, that means an infinite regress of events has taken place. For instance, the events that are happening today depend on the events that happened yesterday. Those depend on the day before that. Those depend on the day before that, and on ad infinitum. Now, what I mean by depend is, for example, yesterday if I got shot, today I would have a bullet wound. Just cause and effect relations. Now, if the universe is past eternal, then an infinite regress of events has ended. Why? Because an infinite number of regress of events was happening before today, and this moment today, this debate is an end of an infinite sequence of events if the universe is past eternal. Now I'll argue why that is impossible. There's a very simple reason for this. Let's suppose, and this is my argument for infinite regress of events being impossible. Let's suppose I was to give Marco $1, but I had to ask someone to give someone else for that dollar, and they had to ask someone else for that dollar, and they had to ask someone else for that dollar, and this went on and on ad infinitum. Would Marco ever get that dollar? No. This shows that an infinite regress of events ending is impossible. And so the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Actually, I'll give a philosophical argument for the beginning of the universe as well. A scientific argument. This is from the second law of thermodynamics. Basically, the amount of useful energy in the universe is decreasing, and universe is heading towards a state of thermal equilibrium. If the universe is past eternal, there's been an infinite amount of time, the universe would have reached a state of thermal equilibrium by now. It hasn't. That's why we are alive, by the way. And this shows that universe is not past eternal, hence it has a beginning. And the second law of thermodynamics will hold in a full theory of quantum gravity because of the Wall theorem. So the universe having a beginning, there's really no way around this. So this shows the universe has a cause. Now, basically, I'll argue for the cause. I'll argue for four arguments for that cause. I should have done this earlier by let me just define God for the context of this debate. An intelligent, powerful, willful, and eternal creator. This is basically the cause of universe according to me, what I'm arguing for. So, till now, I've shown that whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. We are here. Now I'll just go into the attributes of that cause. Firstly, that cause is eternal. It always exists and never does not exist. Why? Because if that cause was not eternal, then that cause itself would require a cause. And if that cause was not eternal, it itself would require a cause. And this would go on ad infinitum. The only way around an infinite regress is to have an eternal cause. Secondly, that cause is powerful. The reason we know this is very simple, because there are about 10 to the power 80 atoms in the universe. Each one of them has an absolutely massive amount of energy. The cause of the universe, whatever that cause is, the eternal cause of the universe, has to be powerful to produce such a universe. So the cause of the universe is eternal and powerful. Actually, I go into the point about cause being willful later, maybe because it takes more time, but I'll go to the other attribute now, the cause of the universe being intelligent. How do we know this? Simply, we know this because of the fine tuning of the universe. Now, what is the fine tuning? Basically, there are a lot of universal constants, and I can go into some of the examples maybe in the open discussion, where even if the values of these constants was even slightly different, a complex life permitting universe would not exist. Now, this phenomena can either be explained as through chance or through necessity or intentionality and intelligence. It can't be due to chance because of the extreme improbability of it. It cannot be due, and I'll get to the multiverse later. It cannot be due to necessity because the universe began to exist. If the universe began to exist, then these constants are by default, by definition, contingent. They are not necessary. And the only option left is design. Now, some atheists will try to posit the multiverse here, but that doesn't work. I'll give a very simple reason. Firstly, understand this point. Many of the definitions of science will explicitly mention observations as being a key requirement for science. Now, multiverse is beyond the observable universe by definition. Hence, it by definition cannot be observed. Because of that, it cannot be science, and we can go into some of the responses in the open discussion. But because it's not science, it's philosophy. Now, there is nothing wrong with philosophy in and of itself. The discussion of existence of God is a discussion of philosophy. But the problem is, in philosophy, Occam's razor basically buries the multiverse. There is no way around this point. So none of the explanation works. Only explanation that works is basically intelligence for the fine-tuning argument constants, and hence the cause of the universe is intelligent. Now, the third argument I'll make for the existence of God is basically the requirement of information for biological life. This is not something I'm making up. This is something everyone nowadays accept, that for biological life to emerge, there has to be a massive amount of genetic information. And basically, information in our experience always comes through minds. Now, someone can claim that basically there is Shannon information, which is basically a type of gibberish, like A B C D X Y Z blah blah blah. That would be that this sequence of characters would be Shannon information. But this explanation does not work. Why? Because if for instance, if the origin of proteins was like it could happen through chance, then this explanation would work. But this doesn't work. And studies by scientists such as Douglas Axe, peer-reviewed studies, have shown that the ratio of functional proteins to non-functional proteins is 1 over 10 to the power 77th. This is an astronomically small number, hence this is extremely unlikely to occur by chance, and physical processes such as self-organization cannot produce specified information. Only minds can do that. Hence, this is an argument for basically a mind being behind biological life. Now, someone can try to posit aliens, and probably we will discuss that in the open discussion. But now, just to go on to some of the atheist arguments, right now, I don't want to strawman my argument, my opponent, but two of the most common atheist arguments are the problem of evil, and most atheists will use Darwinian evolution. You don't have to accept intelligent design to know Darwinian evolution is false. There's a very simple reason for that. The fossil record directly contradicts Darwinian evolution. And this is something even atheist evolutionary biologists will admit. This is the whole reason they came up with punctuated equilibrium, and that itself does not work. And I'll give reasons for that in the open discussion. But so that takes care of Darwinian evolution. Just to address the point about problem of evil and suffering. This is because this is an extremely common atheist argument. The problem with this is it is based on a subjective value judgment. The assumption is if God exists, this life is supposed to be fun and easy and not have pain and suffering. This is a baseless assumption. If this assumption fails, the problem of evil necessarily fails. So I think I have about 30 seconds left, but I think I've said what I wanted to say and I'll end my opening statement.
Okay, thank you. We're going to hand it over to Marco for your 10 minutes opening.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, I don't think I'm going to take all of 10 minutes, but yeah, I basically disagree with all of these arguments that you presented. I have objection to every point you made specifically. So I don't think it's going to be fruitful if we just, randomly just talk about all of these arguments, right? It might be like better if we just focus on one specific argument, right? When it comes to open discussion. So usually, like there are two broad usages of atheism. One is going to be that it's a lack of belief in a proposition that God exists, and the other is going to be that proposition that God exists is false, right? So it depends on the conception of God that you're using, right? I would be a strong atheist towards God of Abrahamic religion. I think like Islam is false, and I think like Christianity as well and Judaism. So when it comes to that conception of God, yeah, I would have a burden of proof. So I would agree with you there that if I'm affirming the proposition that there is no God or like that Christianity or Islam is false, then yeah. And I mean, it's not just argument from evil for atheism, right? Like there are a lot of arguments from intentionality, arguments from arbitrariness, arguments from God not being compatible with his omniproperties, with having personhood and stuff like that. So yeah, so I mean, you said Kalam, right? I mean, I would be interested in open discussion to talk about Kalam. I think that first premise of the Kalam is going to be inductive one. So based on that, I would say, that would be like stretching it too far if you think you can apply it into some kind of metaphysical domain. And also, when it comes to these other arguments, I mean, I think it's more fruitful to use this time that I have for opening to just skip directly to discussion.
I'm not wrong. You're saying that we should end your opening statement and just go into the open discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for your opening statement. Then you guys can jump into the open discussion. 30 minutes or perhaps a bit more. Go ahead.
You can make it 40 or 38.
Okay.
Because I'm only here for an hour.
Yeah, so like when it comes to Kalam argument, right? Like I think I would. I mean, you can present the Kalam argument if you want, like in premise to premise conclusion. I would definitely start with disagreeing with first premise, in a sense, right? And I think like what you stated earlier wasn't actually a defense of the premise, right? At least not a good one. And also, like I would disagree with just to, like when you said like fine tuning, I think I would obviously disagree with that as well. I think it's going to be more like spurious way of unifying things. So I think it's going to be useless as a hypothesis if you have God there. And also like when it comes to you said something about information in DNA, right? Yeah, I think like DNA is just going to be.
First, we can discuss the Kalam, then we can go to fine tuning.
Okay, yeah, I just that's fine. I just wanted to say like information like language can converge to the process of coevolution, right? So I don't think it's gonna be the language that you're speaking of in that sense. That would be like equivocating. But anyway, let's start with the Kalam. Go ahead.
You said that basically your point was that it doesn't apply to metaphysical questions. Basically what you're saying is that it might hold true inside of the universe, but it might not hold true outside of the universe. This is why I was not arguing based on experience. I made a very simple argument. If there is truly absolutely nothing, which is what something emerging from nothing, which is what is the opposite of premise one of the Kalam, why would anything emerge from it? Why would anything change? There is just absolutely nothing. So do you want to respond to this point?
Yeah, like the first premise states that everything that begins to exist has a cause, right? Is that the first
Yes.
premise? Yeah, that's the opposite of that is not going to be creation ex nihilo. It doesn't entail that, it's going to be either that or that something came out of nothing. That's not dichotomous.
Can you name a third
It's a
option?
false dichotomy. Yeah,
Okay,
something came
can you
into
name a third
existence.
option?
So there could be a beginning, right? Without that beginning being caused by anything, and it also didn't come out of nothing.
Can you give an example of it? I mean, you're just positing there is a third option without telling me what option is it. Because
I
either
just told
something
you.
can come from something or it can come from nothing. What's the third option?
No, listen. If you say that something came out of nothing, right, you're implying that there was a state of nothingness that preceded existence, and existence came out of that state. But nothingness is not going to be a state, right? So something cannot come out of nothing. That's going to be incoherent
The
gibberish. We
universe
agree there.
began to exist.
Wait.
On the
Let me
atheist
finish.
view, there is nothing.
Wait. Let me finish the sentence, man, and you can speak. I'm not going to cut you off. So
Okay.
that would imply that there is a previous state of nothingness, right? That universe came from, and we agree that's going to be incoherent because state of nothingness, to me at least, when the way I use terms, is going to be incoherent because nothingness is not a state. It cannot be like the word to be, which is like the verb is, cannot be applicable to the thing that is not, right? So it's going to be like even contradiction there. So I agree, nothing, right? Something cannot come out of nothing. We agree there, right? But that doesn't entail that things cannot have beginning without being caused, because that's not going to entail that they came out of nothing.
Can I respond now?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I don't think this is a false dichotomy. You are saying that there are other options without actually telling what options there are.
I
Either
just told you,
something
man.
comes from something. You didn't. Either something. Now, look, I didn't interrupt you, right? Now, either something can come from something or nothing. What's the third option? Literally, there is no third option in this regard. Anything you posit, right? For example, some sort of fluctuation, some sort of chance, some sort of mechanism, all of that is something. It's not nothing. So, there is no false dichotomy here. If something doesn't come from nothing, then there is a cause. Whatever that cause is, but at least there is a cause. I don't think there's any way around this point.
Yeah, so I
And
understood everything you just said, and I can
Marco,
repeat it back to you.
sir,
But can you repeat back to me what I said?
you said that basically there is a third option that something can come, something doesn't mean you agreed that something cannot come from nothing, but that doesn't mean it requires a cause. There could be a third option. You didn't give a third option. And just to address one of the things you said earlier, that there's a problem of induction here. Well, problem of induction applies to all of science. So, and actually, I don't
I
think
wasn't
this is
talking about
even
the
a
problem of
problem of
induction.
induction
You're
because
not listen. That's changing the topic. We're not talking about the problem of induction. That has nothing to do with
you
what I said
brought this
earlier.
up
And
earlier.
also, you didn't
You
address what
brought
I
the
said,
problem
right? So
of
listen
induction
again.
with
No,
regards to
we are
premise
not
one.
talking about the problem of induction here. It's
Marco,
irrelevant. I'm granting you like the
you
induction. I'm
brought
just
the
saying
problem of
the
induction.
first premise is going to be based on inductive principle. Oh my god.
Marco,
Listen, man.
firstly, you brought up the
The
problem of induction.
okay,
I
okay.
didn't.
Go ahead, finish your fucking sentence and let me speak.
Well, I would if you let me get a word in. Now,
Go ahead,
the
speak.
problem of
When you're
induction.
done, let me know. Let me know when you're done so I can speak. Go ahead.
Okay, firstly, again with the problem of induction, if that's a problem for here, it is actually problem for most of science. Firstly, secondly, again give a third option. Either something comes from something or it comes from nothing. What is the third option? Because you are saying that there may be a third option without actually giving a third option. Address these both points, please.
Yeah, so problem of induction has nothing to do with what I said. Problem of induction is going to be, a human problem that's presented in philosophy, and we are not talking about that. All I'm saying is that the first premise, that something that begins to exist have to have a cause, right? It's going to be based on inductive principle. That's what we observe, right? We don't have any a priori reasons prior to observation to even conclude that the object we are perceiving has to have a cause, right? Or that has to have a beginning, right? That's something we extrapolate from like our experience, right? We perceive things and this is how it seems to us, that there is this causal principle. Causality as well, if you read Hume, know that it cannot be demonstrated, right? Causal principle cannot be demonstrated empirically. That's inferred, where we see whenever we see a strong correlation in nature, right, we infer causation, right? So I already granted, I'm not talking about the problem of induction, right? That's fine. We can skip that. That's irrelevant to the point I'm making. So the point that I'm making is that something can have, like, let's say that whole of universe, right? Time, space, everything, that exists within the universe had a beginning, right? There is no logical contradiction or impossibility, right? And it also doesn't imply that the universe came of nothing if you say that beginning has no prior states and it wasn't caused by anything, right? That's a different statement altogether. It has nothing to do with ec nihilo creation, right? And you're not even understanding what I'm saying, right? So that's why I ask you to repeat back to me what I said, because when you repeated it, right, you just said like you affirmed that I haven't presented another option. You don't see another option, right? That might be like some anecdotal state of your psychology that you're not understanding what I'm saying. But I'm putting straightforwardly, right, that this doesn't imply at all, right, that there was a state of nothingness or like that universe came out of nothing. If the universe, right, had a beginning that wasn't caused by anything else, because there was nothing prior to that. So if you can be specific and respond to what I said without derailing into some other irrelevant stuff, that would be great.
Can I respond now? Okay, so basically, instead of just sticking to the points, my opponent actually made another point. Firstly, I'll address his first claim. He's saying that there's a third option. It's possible there is a third option. Again, tell me what that third option is. Anything he can bring up in this regard would come into basically a category of being a cause. Either there is nothing or there is a cause. There is literally no third option here. Secondly, he brought up the problem of induction. The debate is being recorded. He made that point in his opening statement. So that's not an issue for me. Thirdly, Hume is not an authority for me. So why should I take Hume seriously if you are bringing him up in this regard? Fourthly, he's saying that it cannot be demonstrated that something cannot come from nothing. Demonstrated empirically or philosophically, because I made philosophical arguments for this. If he's claiming that it needs to be demonstrated empirically, what he is assuming is basically empiricism. That empirical evidence is the only valid type of evidence. Prove that claim if he is assuming it. Fifthly, he said that I'm basically making an inductive argument about something coming into existence from nothing. I never did that. In fact, if you look at my opening statement, I said this is not based on experience. If it was, this would be an inductive argument. So I think my opponent is showing a basic lack of logic or comprehension here. This is not something that is just based on experience. This comes from thinking about this point. If there is absolutely nothing, why would anything emerge from that? Why would anything change in this regard? And in the atheist worldview, there is something coming into existence from nothing if the universe begins to exist.
Okay, man, listen. This is not going to go far if you just repeat the same gibberish again. You're not addressing what I'm saying. So listen.
What you're saying is gibberish. Let me address one more point. I didn't
Well, you're talking
you, right?
the same stuff over and over again, right? And I'm trying to explain.
No, actually, you are dodging what I'm saying, which is why I have to repeat some of the points. Now, don't interrupt when I'm speaking, and I won't interrupt when you speak. Both of us can act like.
Yeah, but you talk too much, man, and you're not saying anything.
Marco,
go ahead, speak. Finish your fucking sentence, and then I'll speak.
But a long time, right? I let you speak. I didn't interrupt.
Listen, man.
Don't interrupt me.
Listen. You're not addressing anything I said so far. But go ahead. Finish your stupid point, and then let me speak. I'm gonna be quiet. Okay.
Your points are stupid.
Once
You're
you finish, let me speak as well. But I don't think this is gonna go far.
Marco, you can't get more brain dead than that. Now let me finish my last point. My opponent was saying that basically for something to be impossible, it needs to have strict logical contradictions. Why? Why can't the metaphysical impossibility be relevant? He's making up a criteria. He needs to prove it. And if he cannot prove this criteria, it's worthless. Like atheism. Now my opponent can respond.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I think like at this point you're saying gibberish and you're brain dead, probably. But anyway, let's keep meta nonsense, right? I don't want to get into that.
You have no right to call anyone
that's
brain
fine.
dead.
That's fine. You might think the same, for me as well. I don't care. So the idea here is that I haven't presented that, something is coming out of nothing, right? If I say that the universe had a beginning or everything had a beginning, right? That doesn't imply that there was a state that preceded it or the state of nothingness or that it came out of nothing. Because causation, right, is going to be dependence between two states. Relation, right? The relation dependence between two states. And if there is no a state, right, because nothingness is going to be the absence of a state, right? This is going to be known a priori, right? So the conclusion that something cannot come out of nothing is going to be already like a priori notion, the way I'm using the terms, right? So if there is no like relation of succession between the cause and the event, right, because there was no prior state when it comes to, you know, nothingness not being a state, then it's nonsensical, right, to say that something can come out of nothing. We agree there, right? But if I say that something began to exist without any previous cause, there is no obvious contradiction there or logical impossibility there, right? So if you're saying it's metaphysically impossible, I would dare you, right, to define metaphysical scope, because I don't think you would be able to do it. I don't think you even know what metaphysical scope is supposed to be, right? Or the difference, right, between a metaphysical scope and logical scope, right? So yeah, I would start there. So what's the difference between metaphysical scope and logical scope? And define, you know, like in more concise way, what's a metaphysical scope supposed to be?
Okay, firstly, as for the definition of metaphysics, because metaphysical impossibility is different from metaphysics. Metaphysics itself is generally about basically things that we can't see, like God or causation or things like this. Firstly, as far as metaphysical impossibility is concerned, right? It's different from logical contradictions or not. And I'll give a very simple example of something that is logically
No, don't give me
contradictory.
example. Give me the
and something
definition of
that
the.
is
Listen, no.
metaphysically.
Stop,
Marco,
stop,
don't
stop.
interrupt.
I'm asking you to define.
Marco,
Listen,
don't
I'm asking
interrupt.
you to define metaphysical scope. Stop
Marco,
dodging the question. Dodger, stop
I
dodging the
define
question. I
metaphysics.
ask you a simple,
I literally
straightforward
define
question. Right?
metaphysics.
Oh
Why
my
are you
God.
lying, Marco? I literally defined metaphysics. That's the first thing I did.
No, listen, man. Listen, metaphysics, right, is gonna be a
I
broad.
defined metaphysics.
No,
That's
no,
the
no, no,
first
no.
thing I
This is
did. Why are you
gibberish.
lying?
Okay. So let me
Why are you lying, Marco?
address. Let me
I
address
mean,
what
this
you
is
said.
pathetic.
Let me
I
address what
defined.
you.
No,
Let
don't
me
interrupt me,
address what.
Marco. It's my turn to
Okay, let me
speak,
address
right?
what you
I was
said.
quiet when you were talking.
But you're talking
Now,
gibberish
please
again,
be
man.
quiet
You're
when I
dodging
speak.
again. Okay. You're
Which point
gibbering.
did I dodge? You asked to define metaphysics. I didn't have to do that, but I did define
I asked you to
metaphysics.
define
Now,
metaphysical scope, you dumbass.
what is the
Metaphysical
difference between
scope.
metaphysics and metaphysical scope?
Define metaphysical
Can you
modality.
give me
What is
a
the
Wikipedia
metaphysical scope
article
supposed to
which
be?
defines
Because
metaphysical scope?
metaphysics
Can you give me a Google
metaphysics
definition of it?
deals
Can you give me
with
anything
existence. Oh
with
my God.
regards to metaphysical scope?
You're just talking gibberish.
Again,
Yeah, I think this guy
what's
is
the
a
difference
gibberator. I don't
between
think this
metaphysics
debate
and
is gonna go
metaphysical
far.
scope?
He's not addressing anything. He's intellectually
Marco,
brain dead. So I don't
Yo,
think we can have a debate.
you are
chill,
an
chill, stop,
institute
stop,
that
stop.
to call
Hey,
anyone
hey,
brain dead.
you.
What is
Hey,
the difference between metaphysics and metaphysical scope?
So metaphysics is a broad domain in philosophy. It deals with ontology, which is existence, modality, necessity, or possibility. So modality is already gonna be right a part of like what is meant when we talk about metaphysics. If we're talking about
What is
metaphysical
metaphysical
modalities as
scope
well.
then?
So no, I ask you that question. I'm not gonna answer it for you because you don't know what the fuck
No,
metaphysical scope is supposed to be. Right?
here's my
Listen,
answer.
that
There
was
is
my
no
question
difference
to you.
between
I'm gonna
metaphysics
respond
and
if you
metaphysical
acknowledge that you
scope.
don't know the answer. I'm gonna respond
That is
instead of
just
you.
some
Right?
random word
But
you are
listen,
making up. Can
metaphysics.
you give me
Listen.
can
Oh
you
my
give
God!
me any
Listen, you asked me
philosophical
a
dictionary or
question, so let me
philosophical
speak.
work that defines metaphysical scope?
Yeah,
Give
so
me
shut the
something.
fuck up and let me speak, right? You
No,
asked me a
you
question,
shut the
so
fuck
not
up,
let me
Cloud.
speak.
Give
Yeah,
me
so
a
listen.
definition of metaphysical
Metaphysics
scope
deals
from
with
a
ontology,
philosophical
which is going to be
source.
existence, with modality, which is
Give me
going
a
to talk
philosopher
like,
who defines
which is going to deal
metaphysical
with
Hey,
scope.
necessity and
yo,
possibility.
guys.
Marco,
One at a time, okay? Okay, first,
Well, he
Marco.
asked a question, right?
Okay.
So can I?
Okay, Marco,
Yeah.
you first finish, and then Amar, you can talk without being
Yeah.
interrupted.
So
Okay?
yeah. So example of metaphysical question is going to be if I ask you what kind of thing is a computer, right? So if I ask you what the thing is, right? What kind of thing that is, as a computer? That's going to be a metaphysical question. If I ask you how does it relate to its parts, right? That's going to be like implying mereology. That's going to be a metaphysical question. He doesn't have a fucking clue what metaphysical questions are supposed to be, right? He said something about invisible things, some gibberish like that, right? So metaphysics deals with ontology, which is existence, modality, which is necessity and possibility, identity, like whether it persists over time, mereology, how parts relate to the whole, personal identity, time, like reality of time, cause and effect, whatever, like existence, substance, materialism, or some other idealism views and stuff like that. So all of these are like within the domain of metaphysics. This is what it means, right, to ask metaphysical questions, right? So when I ask him about metaphysical scope is because usually in philosophy, right, in academia, metaphysical scope and logical scope are used interchangeably. And this is going to depend on your views of logic, right? So when someone says that something is metaphysically possible or impossible, they mean that it's logically impossible or possible, right? Because they use it interchangeably. But if they don't mean that, because William Lane Craig makes the distinction there, then he would have to define, right, metaphysical scope in some kind of more narrow way, right? So metaphysical possibility is going to be more narrow than logical possibility. But all he can do that is either, as William Lane Craig does, appeal to intuition, right? Which is going to be like, I would say, self-defeating as a, as an argument, because there are so wide varieties of like differences in intuitions when it comes to metaphysical possibilities, and this is why it's considered to be a mess, right, in philosophy. Or he's going to say like something in between metaphysical possibility is supposed to be, metaphysical scope, something in between phenomenological possibility, which is dealing with the laws of nature, the scope of nature, and what's going to be like a logical, the broadest sort of scope of possibility, like a logical possibility. So when I ask him to define the differences between these two things, I don't even understand that, I don't think like he knows what I'm asking him. Like so far, all he said it was like some completely irrelevant stuff or gibberish, or he repeated himself. I don't think like we made any progress in this discussion, because the point I made and addressed earlier went over his head. He doesn't even know what I'm saying, right? And he talks like to some imaginary atheist out there. He's saying like, oh, these atheists, whatever, like, that's not even what I said, and he heard that I said induction, and he immediately thought I was talking about the problem of induction, which is completely wrong, at the beginning. All I said is that the first premise, not the whole argument, but the first premise is going to be something that's going to be supported through induction, right? Because I don't see any reason a priori to conclude, right, that there has to be a beginning for something that there has to be like a causal principle that's going to be applicable if there is a beginning to something, right? Like, for example, if a state began to exist or an object began to exist, right? I don't think like we have to conclude, right, by some kind of necessity that it had to have like a prior state that was the cause of that, state that was a later one in the succession, right? But if you think that it had to have a cause in that sense, and you want to apply the principle of sufficient reason in a way that he's applying it, you would have to give an argument for that. Because I don't see like that entails that it had to come out of nothing, right? That's also like ludicrous. That doesn't follow.
Okay, please try to keep it short
go
here.
ahead.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, so basically what my interlocutor is doing, he's trying to use confusing terms and basically try to muddy the waters, right? I'll ask him a simple question and I want to respond to him in his speaking time. Can he give me a philosophical definition from a philosopher of the term metaphysical scope independent of metaphysics? This is just a term he made up right now. Firstly. Secondly, in our open discussion, I didn't address some random atheist. I was addressing this guy. I mean, so he's blatantly lying there. Thirdly, basically understand the difference between metaphysical impossibility and logical contradiction, right? I'll give examples of each of these, and I was giving these examples before he interrupted me. Logical contradiction is this: either I am standing or I'm not standing. Me standing and not standing at the same time is a logical contradiction. Say, like someone, I'm eating or not eating. I'm eating, I'm not eating at the same time. That is a logical contradiction. A metaphysical impossibility would be something that there are no logical contradictions in, but it still cannot happen. And by the way, this is a common trick atheists pull, that basically what they try to do is that logical metaphysical impossibility is based on intuitions. It's not. And I'll give a very simple example of this, and this point actually most atheists will agree with me. Let's suppose you start counting from 0, 0, 1, 2, 10, 20, 100, million, billion, trillion, right? Can you ever reach infinity? No. Even atheists like Malpass and that clown Moore, they will agree that you cannot reach infinity. There are no strict logical contradictions in you counting from 0 to infinity. Yet still it cannot happen. It can never happen, because any number you will count, there will always be a greater number ahead of it. This is why this is something there are no strict logical contradictions in. Yet it is still impossible. So if atheists are going to come up with random criteria, they have to prove it. Now, I think that addresses all of his whining till now, but I'll address one more point. He's saying there is a third option. Either something can come into existence from nothing, or there is a cause, or there is a third option. Again, tell me what that third option is. There is no third option in this regard. Tell me what that third option is. Please address my points.
Yeah, I think you're dumb. I already told you the third option. So I think this is spewing gibberish again, right? So I already explained the third option is going to
You
be
are
that the
brain
causal
dead.
principle
I mean,
is
you have
not
to argue
applicable. You ask a
something, then
question,
come
so
into
shut the
existence
fuck
from
up.
nothing.
Shut the fuck up.
How
Shut the
much more
fuck up.
brain dead can you
Shut
be?
the
You are
fuck
not
up.
answering the
Shut the
question.
fuck up
Yeah,
and let
okay.
me
Shut the
speak.
fuck
What the
up,
fuck is your
moron.
problem?
You are not answering
Yeah,
the
listen.
questions.
I was
I
quiet
will interrupt
during your
because you are not
gibberish. Your
answering the
gibberator, right?
questions.
So let him
Why
finish,
aren't you
please.
responding, clown?
Yeah, so shut the
Seriously.
fuck up
I
and
mean,
let me
you
finish
clowns
my
have to
point.
argue something,
Okay,
Listen,
then
look,
come
look.
into from
Yeah, listen,
nothing.
both. Oh,
How
Amar.
much more
Okay, listen.
pathetic and atheist
yeah,
cat?
mute this
Amar,
jackass
look,
because it's
listen.
my turn, right? So mute this jackass, right?
Okay, Marco.
Okay.
Look, what's the third option, man? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the third option is the one that I explained like for tens of times so far, right? Like this is gonna be like me repeating myself endlessly, right? It seems because I said, right, that if he thinks that it's either gonna be the thing had a cause, right, like universe had a cause, right, and that cause was like a prior state that preceded the universe existing, right, or it's gonna be that there was like a state of nothingness that universe came from, right? I would say that's a false dichotomy because the thing that I'm presenting as the third option, right, is going to be that neither of these two things. So there was no state of nothingness that universe came from. So when you say universe came from the state of nothingness, that's going to be incoherent gibberish because it's applying the principle of dependency, like like causal relation. The causation is going to be dependence between two states, right? So there is no causal relation there, right? Because there are no two states out there, right? So what I'm saying is that the universe could have a beginning, could have began to exist without any prior state that it depended upon. Wasn't caused by anything, and it didn't come out of nothing, right? So this is obviously different, right? Altogether a different option. And he's not acknowledging or understanding that. And then he just repeats a question, what's the third option, right? I already explained it so far. I'm not gonna like repeat myself endlessly if he's too brain dead to get it, right? Anyway, what I said about intuition being metaphysical, about intuition being what we kind of use to talk about metaphysical scope is not my notion or atheistic notion. That's what William Lane Craig uses. That's his defense, right? When he says that, when he presents Hilbert's Hotel, when he talks about Grim Reaper paradoxes and stuff like that, he's not saying that, a past infinitude is going to entail some kind of logical contradiction. He's not that dumb, right, to say that those stupid gibberish things, right? He never said that. He's saying that it doesn't it seems absurd, but by absurd, he doesn't mean it's logically incoherent or it entails a contradiction, right, in a logical sense. All he's saying is that intuitively, right, it seems absurd to him, right? But that just might be a feature about, things being infinite, right, as Alex Malpass pointed out a couple of times. So even Alex Malpass said, William Lane Craig is not that dumb to say, stupid shit like this guy is saying, right? Nobody's saying that, right? He doesn't even understand what is supposed to be said in Kalam argument, right? At least the version that William Lane Craig is presenting. So it's not atheists who are saying this. I'm just saying this is like one approach that anybody can take and just, refer to their intuition when they're talking about logical scope. But if you're not saying that, right, and you want to say that logical possibility is going to be broader than metaphysical one, and metaphysical one is going to be more narrow, then metaphysical one is going to be somewhere in between logical possibility, which is the broadest scope of possibility, and nomenological possibility. As I said earlier, nomenological possibility deals with the laws of nature. What we know about nature and what's going to be like known through, a posteriori means. So it's going to be somewhere in between, right? If you want to say it's, different than logical possibility. And I mean, I don't think like this discussion is going anywhere. So he's just going to repeat the same gibberish. We might as well jump to Q&A, questions and answers.
I can respond, then we can go into Q&A. Okay, so firstly, now he's accusing, I am saying that there are logical contradictions in this issue. I mean, the cognitive dissonance this guy is having is actually very impressive. Now, I want you to think, did you listen the entire time he was explaining the third options? He said that it's not something from nothing and it's not causation, but he never told what the third option is. I mean, this is just pathetic. But just to get into the last point about metaphysical impossibility and it being about intuitions, while it is intuitive, it is not just about intuitions. And I gave a very simple example of this. If you count from starting from zero, counting to infinity, there are no logical contradictions in that happening, yet it will never happen. It's not just intuitive, it's true, and even Malpass and more accept this point for this reason that there are no logical contradictions in this, yet it is still impossible. There is no way around this point. If you start counting at zero, 1, 2, 10 million, billion, trillion. You will never reach infinity. There are no strict logical contradictions in this, and it still cannot happen. So it is not just about intuitions. The point I made regarding infinite regress, it's not just about intuition. That seriously, this guy dodged the entire he dodged everything else that I mentioned, and he's dodging the argument that we are discussing in the first place. Kalam, seriously, ask this clown to address in the question and answers. Ask this clown to address the argument I made regarding infinite regress and address this point about metaphysical impossibility, logical contradiction, and counting to infinity, because this is a clear cut example against him for a very simple reason. There are no strict logical contradictions in counting to infinity, yet it still can never happen. We can go to the Q&A now.
Okay, we're gonna have like around 15 to 20 minutes Q&A. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'm gonna put you on stage and ask a question to one of them. And you can perhaps also ask a follow-up question, a short one. So yeah, anyone?
I just have a comment. This is a dog shit conversation, as I expected. That was my hypothesis. This guy's brain dead. So I didn't expect much.
Okay, Rizzy, what's your question? And to who is it?
Question. I'm a Adil, so I think I wasn't here for most of the debate, but I'm just going to presuppose that you did demonstrate that a necessary existence does exist. But did you demonstrate how that necessary existence is equipped with knowledge and equipped with will? Did you demonstrate its attributes? Did you just prove that something which is uncaused exists? Because even if you were to grant that something uncaused exists, I don't think that it would suit the definition of the classical theist conception of God. So did you prove that God possesses a will and he possesses knowledge? And what arguments did you present?
Okay, in this debate, I just proved three of the attributes of the cause of the universe: intelligent, powerful, and eternal. So I made arguments for that. As far as
Yeah, so
willful is concerned, we didn't get around to it, but I'm happy to do that.
all right. So
Like,
could
do
you
you want
present
me
me?
to do that right now?
Listen. Can you present the arguments for God's knowledge and will?
I didn't make an argument for God's knowledge. I made for will. Do you
Okay.
want me to
Okay.
present?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So through an infinite regress, we know there has to be a first cause. Now, either that first cause is acting itself or something is forcing that first cause to act. If that first
Okay.
cause is acting itself, choosing to act, then it has a will. If something is forcing that first cause to act, then that has a will. But using Occam's razor, we can just make it one cause that has a will. So that's my
But
response to.
why does something acting upon something else mean that it has a will? If I have the sun, right, and the sun's rays act upon the creation in our respect, so we live in the earth, and the sun's rays act upon us. It does not mean that the sun has a will. The sun does not consciously choose to will, yet it acts upon us.
Here's a very simple response to this, because it's a first cause. In the case of the sun, there are natural processes behind it, right? Through the formation of the sun, the activity, it's basically sending rays. There are natural processes behind it. It's not the first cause. The question is regarding the first cause. Now, either that first cause, there are two options here. There are no third options here. Either that first cause is choosing to act or something is forcing that first cause to have. Either way, you end up with a will.
You're already
Okay,
presupposing that it
Rizzy.
has will.
Okay.
Why,
Yo,
why,
Rizzy,
why can't it act?
wait. Yo, wait. Ask your last follow-up question, and then someone else is gonna talk. Okay.
All right, why can't it act by natural necessity? Why does it either have to choose or something chooses for it? Why can't it just act by its own nature, which makes it produce one specific effect, which it does not consciously choose to do?
Okay, thank you.
Why can't
Well,
it by natural
if it
necessity?
could, can I just address this point?
Yeah, answer.
Okay. If it could act basically through natural processes, that implies that it was already acting. It was acting again and again, so it's not the first cause. Because
Okay, can I say something
again,
quickly as well?
it's acting again and again. There is a series of changes involved. In your example, there will be a series involved. Either way, you end up at a first that is not acting. That is not basically changing. It's unchanged. So either something forces it to act or it chooses to act. At that point, there is no third option. Uh,
Yeah. So can
Someone
I
has a
say
question.
something
If
as well?
no one else has,
Oh my
we can
God.
talk as well.
Still not. No, listen. I want to respond as well, right? I want to say something. So, I wasn't saying, like, to be clear throughout this debate, that past infinitude is impossible, right? I wasn't saying that. That was like something we didn't get around to, right? Because I think like past infinitude is possible, and I don't think it's logically impossible, right? That you have like that you can have contingent things, that are going to be dependent, and this dependency relation is going to be, beginningless, so it doesn't have any beginning, and you can still have like this moment occurring right now, right? So I don't think like there is any kind of contradiction. But I was saying earlier, right, that when it comes to applying this principle of sufficient reason, there could be like something that's brute fact, right? So it has no further explanation. So that's all I was saying. If the universe began to exist, the universe could be a brute fact, and it could have a beginning. And that fact, right, which is going to be brute contingency, doesn't have any further explanation. If by explanation you mean some kind of dependency state, like a causal relation to something else, right? So this is already accepted in philosophy. I wasn't saying anything controversial. This guy just, ignorant. That's about
Okay.
it.
No,
Yeah,
actually,
we
you
have
were
to move
saying
on from
something
this point.
brain dead,
No, no,
but
look,
let me
look,
just address this point.
Yeah, we have to move on from this point because there are different questions also still. Hold on.
Okay.
Next person. Gabriel. What's your question and who is it for?
Yeah, it is for Ammar Adil. So he said like, okay, first cause, like the difference between the sun and first cause, that the first cause has to have a will, and sun doesn't have a will because it's first cause. So again, humans have will, right? They are not first cause. Sun doesn't have will, and it is not first cause. So it is. So here we presuppose intelligence, right? Awareness, right? So just like humans can have a will and they are not first cause, and sun does not have a will, and humans have a will and they are not first cause, sun does not have a will and it's not first cause. The first cause, it is possible that it does not have a will and still can do stuff just like anything else.
Okay. Firstly, I think you misunderstood my point. I was never saying that only the first cause has a will. In this context, I was saying the first cause has a will for a very simple reason. In case of the sun or anything else, there are causes affecting it, and there is no necessity in this regard, because the first cause, if it was necessary for the first cause to basically create, then it would always be creating. There is no way around this point. Secondly, my interlocutor was saying that it could be a brute fact. Universe can be a brute fact. It can't be. Universe began to exist, therefore it's contingent. But to get to the point about the will, again, think about this. There is a first cause, right? The contention is basically that it can be acting through some sort of physical processes. But any kind of process, any kind of change would involve causes as well, causes prior to it. It wouldn't be the first cause then. Because let's suppose, just a conceptual example, the first cause is a ball that is knocked over by another ball. In that case, the ball, it's not the first cause. If there are physical processes acting on it, right, or there are changes taking place, then the first cause we are mentioning, it's not the first cause. Then something prior to it has to be the first cause. In our example of basically God having a will, or the cause of the universe having a will, there is a first cause. There is nothing acting on it, nothing forcing it. It's just in a state of some sort of rest, or not acting. It is choosing to create at that point, because there are no physical processes there. Again, there are three options here. Either the first cause is acting, choosing to act, something is forcing that first cause to act, or there are processes involved. In case of processes, it's not a first cause. In the other two, we can just use Occam's razor to eliminate someone else, and hence the first cause has a will.
Okay, please try to keep it short, yeah, because we have more questions. Does anyone have a question for Marco specifically? I'm just gonna get to the next one. Radical skeptic.
Right, hello.
Hi.
My question is not for Marco though, so I don't know if
Okay, that doesn't matter.
you can chime in. So, Amar, I'll grant you that the first cause can cause indeterminacy, right? But I don't think libertarian free will is the only thing that qualifies for this, because there's many other potentially naturalistic phenomena which can qualify for some indeterministic causation. And I would argue that it's much more parsimonious to say that the first cause is not personal and causes indeterministically than it is to say that it's personal and has some libertarian free will. So how would you respond
Wait
to
a
that?
second. Who are you talking to? To me?
I'll just give the thought, and then if any of you want to talk about it, you can talk about it. But I feel like, Marco, you're not getting much time to talk, so you can maybe respond to this, and then
Well,
tell
I
us.
mean, causation can be indeterministic. There is indeterministic causation, but I mean that's not really relevant to what I was saying earlier. I mean, my point was something else.
No. His argument. He was arguing the first cause must have had some irada, right? The first cause must have had some independent will, some libertarian free will. I just said that.
Oh, you're responding to something he said. Yeah, I'm not like I tuned off. I'm not really listening to his responses.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad.
I mean,
Okay.
it's complete gibberish. I mean, I'm kind of doing something
Okay.
else as well.
Can I respond now?
Sure, you can respond. Go for it, bro.
Okay, you said that it's possible other naturalistic explanation, blind processes or whatever could explain this point. Can you give an example of anything that explains this point? Because,
Yeah, sure.
like,
So,
can you give a third option?
oh no, this isn't a third option. This is regarding your attributes that the first cause must have had some irada, some will. So I would say that the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics qualifies for this, right? Because the Copenhagen interpretation says that when the electron is measured spin up or spin down, that's completely indeterministic. That's completely random, right? So I'd say that's a mechanism
Okay,
which explains this indeterministic causation much better than some libertarian free will because it's much more parsimonious.
okay, I'll address this point. Firstly, going by interpretations of quantum mechanics in this case is not really suitable because we have indeterministic interpretations of quantum mechanics and we have fully deterministic interpretations of quantum mechanics. So that seems like a waste of time. In any case, indeterminate causation is still causation. And even in the example of a first cause, even there being something indeterminate causation does not apply. This doesn't solve the issue because that first cause, either that first cause is choosing to act or something is forcing that cause to act. So the problem of the cause of the universe having a will is not going away because of indeterminate causation. Like, how would it in this case?
Can I quickly address that because I was, paying attention to the question earlier because I thought it
Okay,
was.
please comment and then we're gonna move on to the next question.
Yeah, so I think like this is not gonna work. If his response is supposed to be that if you have some kind of mechanism, that's not gonna explain, right? Why why we have universe because while God, that's gonna be God with personhood. Is going to be like more likely explanation due to like his like ability to choose, right, like free will or something, I don't know. So he's not going to be determined in some way, I don't know. So he thinks like personhood is supposed to play like a role here, but I would say if God reasons, right, if he acts out of reasons, if he doesn't act arbitrarily, right, if reasons are supposed to be like internal to his nature, then that's going to follow that his reasons are tautological, right? And since reasons are going to be tautological, I wouldn't take them to be explanatory, right? And since God's reasons are going to be not explanatory, I would say they are kind of arbitrary and God has no reasons for acting, right? So that would be a different argument because, I would say it's not going to work if he thinks, that's one way of responding to that in a meaningful way, because explanation is supposed to be like, when I say something is explanatory, that just means like like that's some fact, right, that is given for something else being explained in this case, and I don't think like that's going to be the case with God.
Okay,
if reasons are internal.
Can I just address this point?
We have to move on to the next question. If you want to discuss, maybe do it after MVC, but we have to move on. Solus, do you still want to ask the question or not? Solus. Okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have one question for Marco and then one for Amar. Marco, do you think the strong PSR leads to modal collapse?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say like if you hold to the view that that every contingent truth has an explanation and it has to have it necessarily so, I would say that in my understanding leads to modal collapse, right?
Yeah, Amar, then what would be your objection to that? Objection to the PSR?
Can you repeat the question?
What would your objection be to the objection that the strong PSR leads to modal collapse?
You don't have to have a very strong PSR. You like it doesn't have to explain every single thing, but some things need to be explained, and there has to be some explanation to contingent facts. I don't think there's any way around this point.
How do you
But that
differentiate?
is a strong PSR.
Yeah, like, what do you mean? Do you know the distinction between the weak and the strong?
The weak PSR is supposed to be that for all contingent truths P, right? It is possible that P has an explanation, but it's going to leave prima facie possibility that it doesn't have an explanation, right? But you already said, Amar, that every contingent thing has to have an explanation, and it has to have it necessarily so. So that's going to be a strong PSR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah,
The
look,
issue is it leads to model collapse, as he said.
yeah, that's what I'm asking. How do you respond to that?
Maybe it's a more detailed topic, and maybe we can have a second debate on it.
Okay, man.
Yeah, otherwise he doesn't know what he's saying.
Okay, that was all.
Okay.
What was the third option again, Marco? You are saying I don't know. You have spent this entire time whining, and you addressed the point about third option. What is the third option?
Third option
Okay, guys.
for what?
Does anyone else have a question? Anyone? If yes, then raise your hand. 10 seconds, and then I'm gonna perhaps close the debate. Oh, look. Oh, no, it's Solus again. Anyone else? Okay, we have someone else. Observant listener.
Hey, what's up? I have a question. So if the definition of time is the measurement of change, does that apply on the chain of reasoning of God?
According to the Islamic position, like God is beyond time. The Sunni position is that God is beyond time, so it wouldn't apply.
So, but it still goes under the definition of time, because time is the measurement of change. So if God decided to do something and then finish doing that and will to do something else, doesn't the definition of time apply on God in this matter?
No, God is beyond time. That's the Islamic position. Change in regards to physical stuff, like this is time. God is
But that was
beyond
the
this.
objection to
The
mechanism that you
Sunni
raised
position is-
earlier. Right, you said like if it's a mechanistic principle, right, it doesn't have any kind of possibility to choose otherwise, and there is like no change
just address
in
one point regarding the
state.
problem of mechanism, since it's being brought up, right? So basically, what Marco was trying to do is that I'm just dismissing any point that does not have a will as being nonsensical. I'm not doing that. I'm doing something else, and this is actually very simple. The explanation that is being given here by the atheist is this, that the first cause doesn't necessarily have to have a will, it can be some sort of mechanism. Now, mechanisms in our experience involves change, right? In that case, there are changes prior to the first cause. If that's the case, the first cause itself is no longer the first cause because there are changes prior to it. This is the problem for the atheist here.
Wait a second, are you
You
holding
can
to the
have,
view of
like,
actus
I'm not
purus?
dismissing. Marco,
Are
let
you
me
holding
finish
to the
my point.
view of actus purus, like eternal creation, like God is internally creating the universe?
No.
Okay, so well, but that was the point that this guy was raising, right? So if God is not like realizing all of his potentials, like actualizing all of his potentials all of the time, right? Then he has unrealized potentials. And therefore, like,
What do you
listen,
mean
I
by
mean,
potentials? Because you can't take the Christian conception of God and apply it here. Why can't
okay,
God
this
choose to
is,
do what God
I think
wants
like
to
you're
do?
not gonna, I think like this is gonna, not gonna go far anyway. So yeah, I'll let maybe someone else has a question.
But before that, just address my point. Why can't God choose what God wants to do? Why does God have to be bound by something? In
Okay,
your
look,
case,
we're
in terms of
look,
potential,
we are
God
gonna have
is
the
bound by
last
something.
question. Your last question, and please keep the answers short, okay? So yeah, okay. We're gonna have Belucci ask the last question. Okay. What's your question?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
We can hear
All
you.
right. I had a question for Ammar.
Okay.
Yeah, I had
What's
a
your
question for Ammar Adil. Yeah, Ammar, do you think that God is limited?
No.
Okay, yeah, that's all I had to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Can God choose not to exist?
No, God is a necessary existence. So
Yeah, there is a limitation.
God is necessary. God just is.
Okay, guys, thank you. Well, the time's over for the